perhaps the 80s.
Okay.
But we're really at the cutting edge of plasma science, so there's a lot of unknowns, and we're just trying to proceed as quickly as we can.
I understand. This world column that you mentioned earlier, or sky pillar, or even cosmic mountain, what do you think would have to take place in order for a thing like that to happen? What I'm asking, I guess, is what would the mechanics of that be? Do we know that today? Do you know? Apparently,
if the intensity of the electric currents coming into the ionosphere of the Earth is high enough, the auroras will collimate, and they'll actually form a column, a pillar shape. And occasionally, auroras are known to take the form of pillars. These are so-called auroral pillars, and I don't think the physics are completely understood of this, but the auroral pillars have been recorded as historical anomalies, so they do exist.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that's being tested at the moment, just exactly what happens if you keep increasing the intensity of an aurora fed into by the solar wind. So that's probably the physics behind the world pillar.
And
it's very intriguing stuff, because there are quite a few ancient traditions that speak about the sun having a tail.
Really?
Or the sun formerly having been connected with the earth by means of a rope. There's the so-called noosing of the sun myths, in which some hero or some mythical ancestor nooses the sun on a rope. And there's a time of eclipse and everything goes wrong. And at some point, the sun is liberated again, the rope is cut through, and the sun goes on its way again. Those stories don't come out of the blue, I believe.
I think you're totally right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, if you take the solar wind into account, they just begin to make so much sense. Indian mystical traditions continue to the present day to emphasize that there's a direct spiritual line between the sun and the earth. And it's like an umbilical cord as well. In the process of creation, we're told over and over again, the earth is born from the sky, and the umbilical cord is the world axis. And the moment the world axis is severed, the birthing process is complete, and the earth is really born, and we're on our own. And this is the essence of the creation of the world. It's basically the birth-giving process of the earth.
Again, I have to return to that idea of would there actually be possible, do you think, for something like that to be visible, so to speak, in regards to the Earth being connected with the sun through some kind of electrical discharge or plasma, as you said?
Well, that's actually not hypothetical. That's actually a fact. The sun is connected to the Earth right now as we speak, and the connector is called the solar wind.
Right.
And it's that steady stream, or perhaps unsteady stream, of charged particles that flow into the higher regions of the poles above the Earth. But most of the time it isn't visible to us. But it's definitely been established beyond the shadow of a doubt. And the first person to hypothesize this solar wind was Christian Berkelund.
Yeah.
A 19th century Scandinavian. Was he Norwegian? Yeah, I believe a Norwegian pioneer of plasma physics.
Yeah.
And the canals through which the solar wind enters into the ionosphere of the Earth, in his honor, are still known as Berkelund currents.
Right.
So this is really a study of. It's an area of intensive study, and this is fully agreed. The only difference is we are claiming, or perhaps I am claiming, that at some point in the past the solar wind was actually visible semi-permanently to human beings on Earth. So the plasma was actually in glow mode for a prolonged amount of time. That's the only difference, but the rope is there, the connection is there.
Very interesting indeed. And I guess this also is a phenomena that potentially could have been seen, maybe not from all points of the planet, but at least, a large part of the planet. Isn't that right?
That's, again, an incredibly difficult question to answer. That's one we are trying to answer through two different approaches. Within the mythical record itself, I am looking for clues of differences in perspective. There are classes of traditions about the appearance of the world axis that don't appear in some areas and do appear in other areas. You put all of that into a computer program, as it were, then it should be possible in the end, and it's an amazingly useful test to measure the direction at which the axis was seen to come into the Earth.
Right.
Second area, and this is probably more scientific based, is the study of the location of petroglyphs.
Right, yeah.
This is a completely new aspect to our approach. We do believe that a large number of the so-called abstract petroglyphs, the geometric petroglyphs, record the same superauroral events. So we're looking at rock art images that belong to the late Bronze Age. I should say the late Stone Age and the early Bronze Age, let's say 5000 BC to 3000 BC.
Right.
And many of those shapes have never been understood. Spirals and columns and concentric circles. And many of them would actually seem to fit the stories we have about the world axis. They would also seem to fit an auroral explanation, an auroral pillar, as it goes through its phases of development. Now, the great thing about petroglyphs is they don't move around like myths.
Right.
The problem with myths is, of course, that they diffuse, so you never know for sure where a particular story was located, say 5000 BC or 1000 BC.
Yeah.
The petroglyphs don't move. So you have data, you have information about the geographic location. And that is something we've been working on for the past 5 years at least.
Really?
We've been cataloging some 20 million petroglyphs worldwide. And the results of this, the research was conducted by Dr. Perret, a plasma physicist at Los Alamos National Laboratories in New Mexico in America.
Ah, yeah.
The initial results suggest or prove that the column was seen to come into the south pole of the Earth, what is today the South Pole.
Really?
And we're still looking at precise angles and variations, and there also seems to have been a twist or a bend in the column close to the South Pole, which would have allowed people on the northern hemisphere to see it as well.
Now,
the column doesn't need to have been exactly cylindrical or perfectly cylindrical.
Okay.
Ancient traditions often say it was crooked or bent, twisted. So it's a really complicated thing we're looking at.
Yeah, I definitely understand that. I mean,
petroglyphs are immensely important because they're found in situ. They have a fixed location. That turns, I think, this whole adventure into science. The fact that we're measuring and testing, because if we're really talking about a unified event, then the data should fit and there shouldn't be exceptions. So that's an incredibly useful test we're doing.
When you're looking at petroglyphs and different images and so forth, are there something then particular that you are looking for, and are you kind of excluding some type of imagery or symbolism?
I am basically trying to establish a database of all kinds of cosmogonic traditions, cosmological traditions, and creation myths. So I'm just trying to be as complete as I possibly can. Obviously, I am looking for parallels and agreements because they are the leading principles in what is universal. You always need to apply some sort of filter, obviously, when looking at large amounts of data. So you do need to look for correspondences, and they lead the way. At the same time, it's very important to keep the anomalies in mind as well. There's always a large amount of data that don't fit. And I have learned that just by taking those exceptions seriously and not just shove them under the carpet, that you actually learn quite a lot.
Yeah.
Once you just categorize the anomalies in themselves, you begin to see new patterns, and often something completely new comes out of that. So this is definitely ongoing research, and it's all about finding the right balance between the agreements we think are universal and the things we are exceptional. Think are exceptional.
Absolutely.
So yes, you can't say that all data fit. There are plenty of exceptions. There's plenty in mythology that doesn't fit. That's going to happen with every theory. But I do believe that if you look at the mythology of the world axis, creation mythology as a whole, that there is a narrative that is at the heart of mythology worldwide, really at the heart. If you look at previous theories of myth, let's say the psychological approach taken by Jung, or the fertility theory of James Fraser, you will have the impression that the examples they choose are far more selective and far less representative of mythology as a whole. I think we've definitely hit the core of what mythology is about.
Right. And this is...
I would say two things emerge from a study of ancient myth. The first thing is that the events take place in the sky, and the second thing is that the events are unusual. They're not talking about the rising of the sun, or the myths didn't start as metaphors for mundane events. They're about extraordinary, shocking, and traumatizing events.
Exactly.
They're about things in the sky, not about mushrooms growing in the field. So if you just take those two keys, then almost all earlier theories of myth fall out.
Well, that's fascinating. I mean, you recently had an article up there on thunderbolts.info called "Peopling the Mythical Landscape," basically about the creation of the world and of man. And tell us a little bit, if you will, about this kind of concept or idea that so many, also, again, different cultures from around the world seem to have the same basic theme going,
Yeah, and obviously the themes themselves are unbelievable. That's the intriguing thing about this. The agreements we find in ancient myths are not obvious or predictable. One thing you will hear wherever you travel is, there used to be this gigantic rope that connected the earth with the sky, and the people used to travel up and down on that cable, and we used to be in touch with the gods, but then something really horrible happened, and the rope was severed at some point, and now we're left alone. And the sky has retreated. It's much further now than it used to be. It all sounds like complete and utter madness from a modern perspective, but you keep hearing the same story over and over again. I've collected hundreds of examples from all 5 continents of this, 4 continents. So there's definitely a message there. The anomalies, again, are leading the way. What are these people talking about? Either they're complete fruitcakes, or there is definitely something going on in the history of the planet that we've missed so far.
Yeah. So, I mean, this idea of let's talk about the creation of man itself. I mean, there seems to be a weird kind of idea there in the mythology that people were around, so to speak, at the time when man was created. So the question that arises there is, how can there be an observer of an event like that? What's your...
The people are the ancestors of the people are always presented as eyewitnesses to creation.
Yeah, exactly.
Very odd in itself. This is, of course, a problem that Christian interpreters and Jewish ones have also been struggling with since antiquity.
Right.
The question that, according to the book of Genesis in the Bible, apparently the author knew what happened in the 5 days before Adam was created.
Yeah.
How would he have known?
Yeah.
The standard Protestant answer has been he was revealed the information by God directly in a vision.
Yeah.
Well, who knows? But it does sound like an ad hoc solution.
Yeah.
And I think the only real answer is to put it into a comparative context. The same conundrum arises in many different cultures, in many different myths. So there really is a paradox when you're looking at ancient traditions, and the paradox is, on one hand, we're told that people were witnessing creation, or this is implicit in the stories. On the other hand, we're also told how the first ancestor was created. I've collected quite a few examples in which the first ancestor was created, but people had already been in existence much earlier, before his creation.
Exactly.
Flagrant contradictions, but they are in the text. One answer is that people aren't always people in ancient traditions. I'd say every anthropologist knows that in societies across the Americas, Africa, traditional societies, that ancestors were often seen as animals or other nature objects, and these are called totem societies.
Right.
And no firm lines were drawn between humans and other living species.